The alarm rang in the dimly lit room, dragging me out of a restless sleep. I lay there for a moment, listening to the familiar drone of the city outside my window. Cars honking, buses screeching, people shouting, sounds that had blended into the background of my life over the years. It was just another morning in a life that had begun to feel like a series of monotonous steps, one indistinguishable from the next. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, squinting at the screen to silence the alarm. It was already 7:30, and I had 20 minutes to get out the door. The days when I woke up excited to face whatever challenges the day held were long gone. Now, I felt like I was running on autopilot, just trying to get from one task to the next. Work, errands, sleep, repeat. Getting out of bed took more effort than it should have. I swung my legs over the side, my feet touching the cold hardwood floor. I sat there for a moment, trying to summon the energy to stand. When had life become so heavy? It wasn't like anything catastrophic had happened. No great tragedy. It was just that somewhere along the way, I'd lost myself. Or maybe I'd never really known who I was to begin with. Once, I thought I had a clear sense of direction, of purpose. But now, it all felt distant, like looking through a fogged-up window. The years had blurred together. I'd grown accustomed to the loneliness, to the routine. It was easier to bury myself in work, to avoid thinking about how empty everything felt. And while I was never quite sure when it all began, I could pinpoint the exact moment it all became overwhelming. By the time I left my apartment, the streets were already alive with activity. The same faces, the same places, the same suffocating repetition. I walked the usual route to the subway station, passing by the coffee shop where I used to stop every morning for a latte. It had been months since I'd bothered. The caffeine didn't help much anymore. The brief comfort of a hot drink wasn't enough to mask the deeper ache that had taken root inside me. I boarded the train, finding a seat near the back. The people around me were absorbed in their own worlds, reading, scrolling through their phones, listening to music. I often wondered if they felt like I did. Was anyone else just going through the motions, pretending to be okay when, in reality, they were unraveling? Or was I the only one who felt disconnected from everything, like I was living in a world I no longer recognized? I hadn't always been like this. In my early 20s, fresh out of college, I had dreams, ambition. I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to matter. But over time, the enthusiasm had faded, replaced by a dull sense of obligation. Work had become a necessity, not a passion. I went through the day, completing my tasks, doing what was expected of me. I wasn't bad at my job, far from it. But I wasn't good at it either. I was just there. The train jolted to a stop at my station, and I followed the crowd onto the platform. Another day. Another 8 hours in front of a computer screen. The fluorescent lights of the office always felt like they were draining the life out of me. One flicker at a time. I clocked in, sat at my desk, and began the workday. Emails, spreadsheets, meetings. Nothing out of the ordinary. Nothing that stood out. As the day dragged on, I found myself staring out the window, watching the city move below me. It was strange how much life was happening out there, while I felt like I was standing still. I thought about all the people I used to know, the friends who had drifted away over time. We'd promised to stay in touch, but life had a way of pulling us in different directions. Now, I could go days without speaking to anyone outside of work. It was on a Thursday, just after lunch, that something unexpected happened. I was sitting at my desk, going through the motions as usual, when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, expecting another pointless notification or spam email. But it wasn't. It was a text from an old friend, someone I hadn't heard from in years. "Hey, I know it's been a long time, but I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. I miss you." I stared at the message, my mind struggling to process it. We hadn't spoken in years. Not since before everything started to feel so heavy. She had been a close friend, someone I could talk to about anything. But life had gotten in the way, and we'd drifted apart. I didn't even realize how much I'd missed her until I saw her name on my screen. For a moment, I wasn't sure how to respond. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to pretend I hadn't seen it. After all, what could I say? That I was barely holding it together? That I felt like I was sinking in quicksand? And every day was just a struggle to keep my head above water? But another part of me, a part that I hadn't listened to in a long time, told me to respond. So I did. I miss you too. It's been rough lately, but I'm hanging in there. How about you? Her reply came almost instantly. I'm sorry to hear that. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. I mean it. That was it. A simple message. A small gesture. But it hit me in a way I hadn't expected. It reminded me that I wasn't as alone as I convinced myself I was. There were people who cared. Even if I'd lost sight of that along the way. For so long, I'd been trapped in my own head, thinking that I had to carry the weight of the world on my shoulders. That no one would understand what I was going through. But in that moment, with those few words, something shifted. I didn't reach out to her right away. Old habits die hard. And I wasn't used to opening up. But the seed had been planted. And over the next few weeks, I found myself thinking about her more and more. I thought about the times we used to spend together. Laughing. Sharing stories. Confiding in each other. I thought about how different I was back then. How much more alive I had felt. It was strange. Really. I had always known that something was missing in my life. But it wasn't until I received that message that I realized what it was. Connection. The simple act of being seen. Of being acknowledged. It wasn't about grand gestures or life-altering events. It was about the little things: the text from an old friend. The smile from a stranger. The moments that reminded me I wasn't invisible. Slowly, I began to take small steps to reconnect with the world around me. I reached out to a few other friends. People I hadn't spoken to in a long time. I started going for walks in the park after work. Taking in the sights and sounds of the city in a way I hadn't in years. I began to notice the little things again: the way the sun filtered through the trees. The sound of birds chirping. The laughter of children playing. And as I did, the heaviness that had weighed me down for so long began to lift. Little by little. It wasn't an overnight transformation. There were still days when I felt lost. When the loneliness crept back in. But those moments became less frequent. Less suffocating. I realized that I didn't have to carry everything on my own. That there were people in my life who cared. Who wanted to be there for me. All I had to do was let them. The text from my friend wasn't a solution to all my problems. It didn't magically fix everything that had been broken. But it reminded me of something I had forgotten: that I wasn't alone. And that was enough to start the process of healing. In the months that followed, I made a conscious effort to stay connected. To reach out when I needed help instead of retreating into myself. I started therapy. Something I had avoided for years because I didn't want to admit that I needed it. I began journaling. Trying to make sense of the emotions I had bottled up for so long. It wasn't easy. There were days when I wanted to give up. When the weight of everything felt too much to bear. But every time I felt like I was slipping back into old patterns, I thought about that text. That simple gesture of kindness that had pulled me out of the darkness. Looking back, I realized that the journey I've been on wasn't just about overcoming loneliness or reconnecting with old friends. It was about rediscovering myself. About learning to be okay with where I am. Even if it's not where I thought I would be. I still have a long way to go. But I'm no longer moving through life on autopilot. I'm no longer pretending that everything is fine when it's not. I'm allowing myself to feel both the good and the bad. And in doing so, I'm starting to find my way back to the person I used to be. The person I want to be. It's funny how one simple gesture can change everything. How a text message, something so small and seemingly insignificant, can be the spark that ignites a much larger transformation. In the end, that's what life is. Isn't it? A series of moments. Some big. Some small. Some that pass by unnoticed. And others that stay with us forever. For me, it was that one moment. That one gesture. That reminded me of something I had forgotten for so long. I'm not alone. I never was. And that realization has made all the difference.